Brings us to the theme of the talk I'd like to give today, which is called Innovation with a Conscience. And in the conference brochure, we talked about three major themes. One is that innovation is the essential factor for the progress of India. There is a great untapped potential, and there's three focus areas. What I'd like to highlight is a few comments about the essential factor for progress, the untapped potential, and specifically to focus on education for innovation. How do we empower people and enable people to be innovative no matter what kind of work they're doing? Now, for untapped potential, I'd like to just draw from former President Kalam, who said, "Invention is the manifestation of originality in thinking, in conceptualizing, the natural inventiveness of the mind. This quality, I'm firmly of the view, is latent. It's in potential in all of us. As far as I can see, the mind and its ability to imagine knows no limits, but what's required is a natural effort to exercise it in a positive direction." And India, with its billion-people population, 30% of whom are in the youthful age group, is a veritable ocean of talent, much of which may be latent. Imagine the situation when the entire sea of talent is allowed to manifest itself in path-breaking innovations. Our country can surely be a torchbearer of progress for the entire world. I will make some comments more specific to that at the very end of my talk about, since I've had one foot in India and one foot in the US for quite a long time, how do I see the role that India can play in the world as far as bringing a different quality and a transformation into the field of innovation itself and design. Now, President Kalam goes on further about the essentials for progress. He says, "Innovation opens up new vistas of knowledge and new dimensions of our imagination to make everyday life more meaningful and richer in depth and content. India has to be powered by innovations and consequent economic strength. Business has to be powered by innovative management, and management has to be powered by leadership." But in an interview with the nonprofit that my wife and I started, we were researching and talking to business executives, chairmen, CEOs, managing directors, and at that time, President Kalam, about spirituality and business leadership. This is how he concluded his interview. He said, "A developed nation has two components. One is economic growth and prosperity, which is what Western societies normally look for. The second is preservation of civilizational heritage. In India, we have a heritage of values, and we want to couple economic prosperity and human values, which are drawn from the civilizational heritage." And see, that's a conversation it's been so evident here today, but I want to bring it forward because it's so lacking. It is so lacking in the conversation about design and innovation around the world. So let's go further into what this human values is all about. The word value actually comes from the old Latin language. In the West, that would be like Sanskrit here in India. And it means, valere means to be of strong or to be of worth. So values are the feelings and convictions of what's of strong worth or what's important to us. They're inherent in all societies, but there are different levels you can think of. There's spiritual values, what I call human values. Those are things that are natural to us. Society and cultural values are things we grow up in, and we acquire those kinds of values depending on which state of India you're from, which country you're from, which tradition you're from. And there's also ego values. Human values, as I'll talk about today, are really from our higher human nature, and they're the positive qualities of good character that are found in all cultures across time. Because they're the things that we aspire to as the best of what human beings can be. It's values like doing no harm, being peaceful, respectful, caring, serving each other, making a meaningful contribution, being responsible, these kinds of values. And those kinds of values can influence what we innovate, why we innovate, how we innovate, and who innovates. I'll add that one from the discourse earlier today. They can raise the level of investment, dedication, and commitment that it takes for us to really pursue, because you often have to move an idea forward against the tide of tradition sometimes, the tide of people's habits. Sometimes you really have to have that persistence and that courage, if you will. Human values give us that holistic picture of longer, wider, and deeper that we've heard about today. Now, let me just tell you a quick story of where I became aware of this. I was working back in the late 1980s with a man named Frank Karuba, who was the head of Hewlett-Packard Laboratories. He was in charge of all the central product development and design for HP worldwide. And he said when he first came to work in that position, he did a research study about what was the difference between unsuccessful teams, successful teams, and those teams that were so extraordinarily successful, even they were surprised by their results. Now, the difference between unsuccessful teams and successful teams was, as you can imagine, differences of talent, creativity, vision, motivation, etc. But he said there was no real difference at all on any of those factors between successful teams and those few truly extraordinary teams. But there were two things that did stand out about the extraordinary teams. The first is that they truly, in his words, they truly cared for their customers. He says, now these are professional geeks who actually thought they had a customer. That was the first breakthrough. But they truly cared, and they really wanted to serve these people. The second thing was that he said they found in themselves a quality of truth and a spirit in which no one had to pretend to be something that they weren't. No one had to pretend to know more than they knew. If they didn't know, they said, I don't know. So what he was telling us was the difference between extraordinary design and product development and simply successful, if you will, was the qualities of caring and authenticity. That with those two values, you could take a talented group that, let's say, could do 70%, and with those values, they could do 90 to 100%. That's human values at work. That's the difference it can make. Now, in a Harvard Business Review article called The 4 Phases of Design Thinking, it asked the question, what ingrained habits are linked to a designer's ability to turn original ideas into innovations? Notice the words they came up with: to question, to care, to connect, and then to commit. Sheila's talk today was certainly a demonstration of what it takes at that 4 levels to really design different solutions to the housing issues and so on. And the classic example, of course, here in India is the Chula stove from Philips, where those qualities came together for Unmesh and Praveen as the core designers of that product. But they didn't stop there with the design of the product. They actually innovated the entire business model, because it was not only the making of the product, but to create a social engineering in which the manufacturing that could happen on roadside little manufacturing plants in the villages. You would train entrepreneurs in the villages who could install and care for. Women could be the actual salespeople. So it created an infrastructure of revenue production and business and work, not just consumerism. Now, to take it one step higher, in 2010, IBM did a global survey of 1,500 public and private sector executives, and they agreed that there were 3 fundamental issues they were facing in running their multinational corporations, and also their public sector organizations as well. First of all, there's a rapid escalation of complexity as the biggest challenge. Second is they're not equipped to cope with that complexity. And third is that the most important quality of a business executive and leader today is what they called creativity, the absolute most important factor. They defined it by saying creative leaders invite disruptive innovation, encourage others to drop outdated approaches, and take balanced risks. But notice further, not only was creativity the topmost, that had 60% of the people rated it as a top issue or quality. The second was integrity, ethics, high values. The third was global thinking. And you've heard a lot of that so far today, and I'm sure yesterday as well. So the values you're hearing about design are really the whole design of business and the infrastructure of business as well. Now, so the question is, how can we develop this creativity and innovativeness, this integrity and human values, this global holistic thinking with individuals, teams, and leaders at all levels? And what I'd like to do is show you a piece of software that my company is developing that is a way to bring to people at all professions, up and down the organization, a way to learn the competencies for being innovative, as well as the opportunity to practice those competencies on real work in a social networking way within your company. This is called NUMMI. It's a beta version, not fully completed yet, but I'll give you just a quick little tour. There's one section about how do you build the actual core competencies, the knowledge and skills and the self-awareness for being innovative. Then there's a place where you actually come together to do the innovations yourself, to actually be guided through the innovation process from start to finish. A place where you can draw together whatever groups of people that you happen to be collaborating with. It could be 3 people here, 5 people on another project, 10 people on another, and you're in a training program with 20. You might pull together 4 different groups. And a place where you can also plan how you want to be innovative and be accountable to yourself for following through with that plan, the commitment that it takes to do it. Now, let me give you a more specific example. With the curriculum, we talk about some basics of innovation. We talk about preparing for innovation through human values, team learning, and innovative thinking, which I'll take you through in a moment more. Producing innovation is around how do you take initiative, what is the innovation process, how do you develop a team, and if you're a leader, what are the qualities of leaders of innovation, how do you build that into your strategic intent as the organization, and how do you develop a culture for innovation? Now, with innovative thinking, you'll notice a particular learning approach. The first is to understand yourself. Now, I picked out innovative thinking, so actually before I go there, let me just show you a short introduction. That in innovative thinking, the way we approach it is that every person has the potential to be creative and innovative. The total quality movement around the world since the 1960s and 70s has proven this beyond a doubt. Every employee has the ability, if given the skills and the opportunity, to contribute important, creative, and innovative ideas to improve processes in the organization. So I'll call that process innovation. It expands out to product, design, business culture, and every other kind of innovation you can imagine as well. Yet we still have different approaches to thinking innovatively. Therefore, the main issue is not, am I innovative, but how am I innovative? Very important shift. We don't use a single approach to innovative thinking, but a mixture of 4 different styles. And the innovation styles profile does not measure your level of innovativeness, but rather your approach or strategy. Now, let me just show you what that looks like. In taking a self-assessment, you begin to see what is your predominance of those 4 styles. Visioning is where you look for an ideal solution. If you could have anything you wanted, what would it be like? If you were designing a new healthcare product, what would the ideal be? Modifying is where you would say, what has already been done and how can we improve, optimize, simplify, expand upon what we've already done? Someone was saying earlier about bringing different factors together. That's experimenting. How can you bring this from this area, something else from here, and create a novel combination of factors, maybe form factors? And exploring is where you question your assumptions and try something totally upside down, if you will, just as we saw, for example, with the train tickets. Suppose those train tickets turned into a lottery ticket. Suppose it turned into an advertising or networking ticket. That kind of questioning the very assumption is the exploring. And so after you understand your own particular way of using those 4 different ways of thinking and getting some self-insights about it, you can then also see in my team, how is my team different from me? How is it the same? What are the dynamics of us working together if some of us love to modify and some of us love to explore, which is the opposite? Is that going to be a conflict, or is that going to be something that we can harmonize and you take advantage of those differences? You can go further and actually learn the concepts and do fun little exercises, for example, where you would say, for example, what supports innovation? Who sees the big picture and provides long-term direction? Who likes to challenge assumptions and discover new perspectives? Who likes to combine ideas? Who likes to focus on realistic short-term needs, and so on, and see how you do? And finally, when you begin to apply it, you can apply it to any kind of work task you want to. This is from business growth all the way through product development, to marketing, to sales, and bring up, for example, if you wanted to match your particular design to your user. You can see, is my product radically new? Is it unique and long-term? Is it adaptable and practical? Is it more of a trusted enhancement? And what about my user? Does my user want trusted enhancements while I'm offering something radical and new? Don't have a very good match. So what are you going to do? So those kinds of exercises, for example, give you a chance to apply what you've learned. Now, I want to give you one quick one if you want to take a note on this. This is something that you can do 2 hours from now, or next time you're in class, or next time you're doing a project. Just write down, if you will, 4 questions. The first question is, what is the ideal long-term solution? The second question is, what could be improved, optimized, or simplified? The third is, what would be radically new and different if we question the core assumptions? And the fourth is, what could be combined to put together a new solution? Now, you could put those 4 questions on the board, and different people are going to interact with different questions depending on which ones are their personal favorite, their native tongue of innovative thinking, if you will. So that's a little small takeaway you can take even from this presentation that gives you a practical idea. Now, that again is one way of approaching the education in innovation. So let me just conclude with a little bit of a vision for India. You know, in the 1950s, made in Japan meant cheap. It was like the last thing you'd buy if you wanted something, but the quality was never considered to be very good and so on. Now, Deming, Ishikawa, and others taught the Japanese leaders about quality improvement processes, and the Japanese, as you all know, transformed the entire field of quality into something of a national distinction where the countries came to Japan and said, how do you do that? Teach us how. But the breakthrough was not simply importing any kind of Western expertise. There was an equally important factor, which was the Japanese culture itself. It had an emphasis on social cohesion, respect for input from everybody, hard work and discipline, a tendency for perfection, a willingness to self-sacrifice, put community benefit above individual interest. And in that soil, the quality movement could grow. Now, for sure, Japan had a lot of cleaning up to do. And that's what the 50s and 60s were about. But by the 1970s, made in Japan meant the best in the world. India has the same opportunity in the field of innovation, both as an economic power, especially known for enabling a values-centered, holistic approach to innovation because of your cultural strengths. One is the historical emphasis on human values to build character. Another part is the culture of inclusiveness, accommodating differences. A third is the rich spiritual traditions. And the fourth is your aspiration to be a world leader. And by transforming yourself first, you could become the world leader that people come to you and say, how do you do this? There's a way in which you're innovating. I mentioned earlier with love, and I meant that seriously. There's a way of innovating with the caring, the connecting, the committing that can be uniquely part and draw upon the rich culture that India has. Part of why my wife and I live here is because we feel that you are the, in a sense, the human values and spiritual home on the planet. And this is where we learn from. And so it still requires tapping into the strength of that culture. But you can bring together East and West. And I think for all of you who are here today, that is, in a sense, the larger opportunity. And I'll close by just, there's a wise saying where I live, that education is for making a life, not for making a living. And my hope for you is that in your education here, you've really made a life, not just been here in order to make a living. But I would say also carry that forward into your jobs. That work is not just for making a living either. Your work itself is for making a life. And I think you've seen a lot of that with the speakers today, how they've each taken what their life is about and used work as an expression of that life that each of you has uniquely and individually. So my wish for you is that whether you're a new student, whether you're an old student, whether you're about to retire or have retired, that your work becomes an expression of who you are, your God-given self, and that it makes a difference to others as well as enriching you. I had a short conversation. I'm forgetting what was her name, from Mahindra. Yeah, yes. See, I don't pronounce my names very well. Thank you. But we were talking about how at Mahindra and at any car company, the discussions between design, manufacturing, engineering can sometimes be argumentative. And I asked her, how do you get past that? And she said, in a sense, as our egos get reduced, the discussions get better. And so even those kinds of moments are a chance for your personal transformation, and it shows up in the quality of the work that you produce. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to have been here today.